In a world where centuries of tradition collide with the relentless tide of modernization, one figure stands at the crossroads of faith and doubt: Pope Leo XIV. Rumours swirl about his true beliefs and intentions, hidden behind the centuries-old robes of the Vatican. As controversial whispers echo through the corridors of power, a clandestine story begins to unfold. One that could challenge everything we thought we knew about religion, authority, and... here's the truth. Welcome to a journey inside the mind of a man caught between faith and skepticism in a time when history and belief collide. Pope Leo XIV sat alone in the dimly lit chamber deep within the Vatican's ancient walls. The room, lined with towering shelves of dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts, was silent except for the faint hum of distant activity outside its heavy wooden doors. The flickering candle casting irregular shadows on the stone walls seemed to mirror the turbulent thoughts swirling in Leo's mind. This was a man caught between centuries of tradition and an unknowable future. A future he no longer felt prepared to face. Despite the grandeur of his position, Leo often experienced moments like this. Hours of solitude where he examined the fragile veneer of his authority and questioned the very foundation of his beliefs. As the spiritual leader of over 1 billion souls, he had always carried the weight of divine authority. But in recent months, a persistent unease gnawed at him. Subtle whispers from the corridors of power, clandestine meetings in shadowed corners, and late-night conversations with trusted advisors hinted that the winds of change were stirring within the holy halls. In the flickering candlelight, Leo's eyes traced the lines of an old parchment resting on his desk. It was a fragment of an obscure text, one that challenged long-held doctrines, an ancient manuscript discovered during a recent excavation of the Vatican's hidden archives. As he read those cryptic words, a shiver ran down his spine. Was it mere curiosity, or something deeper? A suspicion that some ideas long thought suppressed refused to die quietly. His mind drifted back to his childhood, to the stories his grandmother told him about faith, hope, and the divine mission entrusted to him. Those stories had shaped his worldview, a world unified under the banner of spiritual truth, guided by the sacred authority of the Church. But now, questions haunted him, hidden doubts that he dared not voice openly, fears of the consequences should they come to light. What if the modern world was right to question? What if the Church's centuries of dogma were built on foundations that no longer withstand scrutiny? He had seen the faces of ordinary believers, their genuine hope, their unwavering trust. But he also knew that beneath those smiles, many were grappling with their own doubts, their questions silenced by fear of divine anger or ecclesiastical punishment. Leo's thoughts were interrupted by a faint knock at the door. He quickly composed himself, adjusting his robes, and called out, "Enter." The door creaked open softly, revealing a young courtier dressed in practical attire, a messenger bearing a sealed envelope in hand. The courtier bowed respectfully. "Your Holiness, I have come on urgent behalf. This letter arrived by courier just moments ago. It bears suspicious markings, but no signature. The messenger said it contains information of great importance." Leo reached out, accepting the parchment with a steady hand. As he broke the seal and unfolded it, he felt a strange sense of foreboding. The message was brief, yet cryptic. Within the corridors of power, voices are rising, eyes are watching. The truth that once lay hidden is beginning to surface. Trust no one entirely, for shadows conceal more than light. Leo's brow furrowed. The words echoing in his mind seemed to hint at a conspiracy, a web of secrets woven into the very fabric of the church he served. Who was behind this message? Was it a warning, a threat, or perhaps an invitation to see beyond the veneer of the Holy Office? He looked up, meeting the young courtier's gaze. "Thank you. You may withdraw now. Be alert. If anything unusual occurs, inform me immediately." As the door closed behind him, Leo sat back in his chair, absorbing the gravity of the message. His heart pounded, part from the fatigue of duty, part from the awakening curiosity about what truths were being uncovered, and part from a deeper, more personal fear. For in these uncertain times, even the most steadfast faith could be tested. In the silence of the chamber, Leo bowed his head briefly, praying silently for guidance. Was this the beginning of revelation, or a path leading him toward peril? Whatever the future held, he instinctively knew that the days of complacency were over. The silent crisis was beginning, and no amount of prayer could obscure the ominous shadows creeping within the sacred walls. As Pope Leo XIV sat hunched over the ancient archives, the dim glow of the oil lamp flickered against the dusty parchment and leather-bound volumes stacked around him. For hours, he had been poring over documents, manuscripts, and rare texts hidden away in the Vatican's deepest chambers, long-forgotten relics that seemed to echo with the whispers of a different era. Now, amidst the weight of history, a troubling realization began to take shape within his mind. He was uncovering truths that challenged everything he had been taught. Many of these manuscripts were written by scholars and clerics from centuries past, some anonymous, others highly revered, whose doubts and critiques had been carefully concealed within codes and allegories. Leo's eyes darted across a handwritten note penned in a hurried scrawl, concealed within a rare book on church doctrine. It read, in part, "The faith that endures is not always the faith that is preached. Beware those who seek to silence the voice of questioning." Leo's brow furrowed deeply as he read these words, feeling an unsettling mixture of suspicion and curiosity. He paused, eyes wide with reflection, as visions of countless church councils and debates flooded his mind. Was doubt as old as the church itself? Had skeptics and reformers existed from its foundation, whispering in secret to avoid the wrath of authority? In some manuscripts, he found echoes of voices questioning whether divine truth was ever truly fixed, or if it was, instead, a constantly evolving human interpretation. He leafed further through the fragile pages, discovering annotations, proof that in centuries past, even revered theologians had wrestled with doubts, heretical ideas, and controversial theories. During one late-night session, Leo uncovered a manuscript bearing marginal notes in Latin. "Religion must adapt, or it will die." Those words sent a shiver down his spine. It was a stark contrast to the doctrine of unwavering obedience that he had been brought up to uphold. The realization hit him hard. What if the church's history was more complex than the harmonious story he had been taught? Could the seeds of reform and skepticism have always been present, concealed beneath layers of dogma? Had the Church's authority often been maintained by silencing dissent rather than resolving doubts? He closed his eyes briefly, pushing the weight of this heretical question from his mind. Yet his heart beat faster as he contemplated the implications. If the Church was built on a foundation of suppressed questions, what did this mean for its future? Was divine truth immutable, or was it something humans could only interpret imperfectly? And if so, what role did faith play in a world where doubt persisted, where the very fabric of dogma might be woven with threads of uncertainty? Leo paused, his hand resting on a leather-bound volume titled The Heretical Thinkers. As he flipped through its pages, he found references to individuals branded as heretics for daring to challenge the Church's authority, scientists, philosophers, even priests, whose ideas were condemned as dangerous heresies. Their stories were often marked by ostracization, exile, or worse, yet many of these figures had sought truth beyond the strict boundaries of doctrine. Images flooded Leo's mind. Galileo's telescope peering into the stars, questioned relentlessly by ecclesiastical authorities. Giordano Bruno's fiery speeches about the infinite universe, which landed him on the flames. Even the whispers of reformers like Martin Luther, who dared to challenge papal authority and ignite a revolution. All these figures had faced persecution, yet their ideas persisted, whispering through history. He wondered, had the Church's greatest moments of transformation come not from blind obedience, but from internal crises? Moments when doubt pushed its leaders to reconsider the very foundations of their faith. What might it mean for him now, in an era where modern science, philosophy, and critical thought continue to deepen and spread? Was it possible that the old dogmas would eventually crumble under the weight of new ideas? Or could they be more resilient than he had believed? His fingers traced the contours of a faded engraving, a depiction of a council, perhaps from centuries past, where theologians debated fiercely. Some figures wore expressions of genuine conviction, others of uncertainty. Leo's gaze settled on one figure, shrouded in shadow, a reminder that even within the highest echelons of the Church, doubts had lurked silently, waiting for their moment. The room grew colder as he reflected on the modern-day implications. Rumours and whispers told of rising movements within the Church itself, whispers of reform, of questioning authority, of adapting spiritual teachings to an increasingly secular world. These were dangerous ideas in the eyes of many, yet pressing and inevitable as the tide of modernization gained strength. As darkness enveloped the Vatican's formidable corridors, Pope Leo XIV found himself pacing silently in the dimly lit chamber, the secret message weighing heavily on his thoughts. The cryptic words had stirred a restless unease within him, an instinctual suspicion that powerful forces far beyond his understanding were mobilizing in ways that could threaten the very foundation of the Church he served. He was aware of the delicate balance he maintained, a fragile equilibrium between tradition and the inevitable tide of change that loomed on the horizon. The quiet hum of distant activity was occasionally interrupted by the faint echo of footsteps, or the distant clatter of keys from the inner sanctums. But in this moment, Leo's world shrank to the small, enclosed space of his chamber. As he leaned back against his ornate wooden desk, he closed his eyes, trying to piece together the fragments of uncertainty that had begun to form in his mind. This was no ordinary warning. Something more personal, something urgent. Suddenly, A faint tap on the door broke through the silence. Without hesitation, Leo straightened and called softly, "Enter." The door opened gently, revealing a figure cloaked in shadow, a man, or perhaps a woman, whose features were obscured by a hooded cloak. The visitor moved with measured, deliberate steps, halting just shy of him, and lowered slightly to bow. "You called for me, Your Holiness," the figure said in a voice that was calm, yet tinged with a sense of urgency. The voice was smooth, measured, and slightly husky, betraying no emotion but projected with undeniable authority. Leo studied the stranger carefully, noting the unassuming attire. No sign of ecclesiastical robes or insignia, just plain garments suited for secrecy. The Pope's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the visitor's face, trying to gauge whether this was a friend or foe. "What brings you here at this hour?" he asked softly, voice edged with cautious curiosity. The visitor paused for a moment, then reached into a concealed pocket and produced a small, carefully wrapped bundle. An envelope sealed with no markings, but with a distinct, unfamiliar emblem embossed in dark ink. Without a word, the stranger extended the envelope toward Leo, who hesitated briefly before accepting it. The resonance of unseen danger made him acutely aware of how precarious his position truly was. Carefully, Leo broke the wax seal and unfolded the parchment within. The message was handwritten in a hurried, scrawling script, almost frantic in its tone. "The truth is stirring. Shadows are gathering. Trust no one fully. Secrets long buried are rising to the surface. Be watchful. Your next move is crucial." As Leo read these words, the flickering candlelight cast ominous shadows across his face. His mind raced, trying to interpret the meaning behind the cryptic warning. Who had sent this message? Was it part of a conspiracy? An internal movement within the church itself? Or was an external force attempting to destabilize the hierarchy? The possibilities swirled like a storm that refused to dissipate. The messenger straightened and bowed again. "You must be cautious, Holy Father. The ones behind this are clever and well entrenched. Inside the church walls and beyond. They believe the old order is dying, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to reshape the future." Leo's eyes hardened slightly. The tone was unsettling, an unspoken threat wrapped in the guise of concern. He nodded slowly, processing what little he knew. "And what is it that you seek from me, Tuisife?" he asked quietly. "Why approach a pope with such words, without assurance of safety?" The figure took a step forward, voice lowering even further. "Because you are key. If you choose to stand with them, to see the truth, then you will be at the heart of the coming storm. If you remain silent, they will move in silence, and the darkness will swallow what remains of the old order." Leo looked away for a moment, contemplating the weight of those words. The room grew significantly colder as a sense of foreboding settled over him. This was no ordinary threat. It felt like a prophecy of upheaval, a collision course that threatened to unravel centuries of tradition and authority. The stranger's voice broke through his thoughts once more. "You know the times are changing, Your Holiness. The modern world talks of reform and freedom. But within the walls of the church, a different struggle is unfolding, one where belief and doubt are intertwined, where secrets are guardrails for those who fear the truth." Be careful. Those shadows will strike when least expected. With that, the visitor turned and exited silently into the night, leaving Leo alone once again. The door closed softly behind him, and silence returned to the chamber. Leo sat alone in the sanctum of his private chambers, the flickering candle casting an uncertain glow across stacks of forbidden texts and manuscripts that he had clandestinely gathered over weeks. He knew, deep within his soul, that what he was about to undertake was dangerous. These were not ordinary books. Many were condemned, outlawed by the church for their heretical ideas or heretical potential. Yet he felt an irresistible pull, an urgent need to seek out the answers that could either confirm his suspicions or drown them in the depths of obscurity. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and curiosity as he prepared to read. Carefully, he unwrapped a fragile vellum manuscript, an ancient translation of writings from a late medieval scholar who dared to question the divine authority of the church. The words were handwritten in Latin, dotted with annotations in a different hand, perhaps the scholar's own notes or later additions by other heretics. The text challenged the dogma of divine infallibility, suggesting that faith might be a human construct, subject to change and interpretation rather than divine dictate. Leo traced the delicate ink with his fingers, feeling the weight of history and rebellion contained within those pages. As he read, he felt his pulse quicken. Within the Latin passages, he discovered ideas that seemed almost revolutionary for their time. Arguments that questioned the very nature of divine truth, proposing that religious doctrines were products of human craftsmanship and societal need rather than absolute divine revelation. He paused, contemplating the implications. If such ideas had previously been dismissed or feared, how much of the modern church still held on to these ancient doubts, perhaps unknowingly? Could it be that the institution itself was built on a trembling foundation of human beliefs, filtered and reinforced through centuries of dogma? And if these ideas had persisted underground, waiting to resurface, what did that mean for him now? The room was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft rustle of pages turning. Leo's mind was racing. His own doubts resurfaced, often suppressed beneath layers of reverence and duty. He was haunted by a persistent question. Was faith always meant to be blind? Could reason, science, and secular philosophy somehow coexist with spiritual belief? Would confronting these forbidden texts lead him closer to truth, or into dangerous waters? He reached for another book, a leather-bound volume that contained the writings of reform-minded theologians from centuries past. Here, Leo found more forbidden truths. References to secret societies within the church, heretical circles that had once clandestinely debated reform, and clandestine meetings where clergy wrestled with their conscience. These pockets of dissent had been stamped out, yet the writings revealed that the spirit of questioning had never truly died. Suddenly, Leo's eye was caught by a fragment of a letter penned by a prominent heretic, a respected scholar expelled from the church for daring to challenge orthodoxy. The letter spoke of a great awakening, an era when truth would no longer remain confined within cathedral walls. It warned of the coming age, an age where the divine is not confined to the dogma of men, but resides in the individual heart and mind. Those words resonated deeply, igniting a spark of defiance within him. Leo's hand trembled as he uncovered a hidden compartment in the desk, revealing a collection of philosophical treatises, some from secular thinkers like Erasmus, others from mystics and heretics banned long ago. These texts examine the nature of truth, knowledge, and the divine. Many argued that faith must evolve or perish, and that the Church's authority was increasingly challenged by the rise of scientific inquiry and philosophical skepticism. These were ideas that many church leaders considered dangerous heresy, yet they persisted in secret, inscribed in forbidden books, and passed through covert networks. As he ingested these ideas, Leo felt a conflict tearing at his conscience. The tension between loyalty to tradition and the tantalizing promise of truth and enlightenment. Could he continue to serve a church that may have long lost touch with the essence of true faith? Or was he destined to become one of the reformers, the heretics, who dared to question the divine authority they preached? The deeper Leo delved into these texts, the more he discovered about the shadowy history of dissent within the church. Accounts of monks, priests, and scholars who had secretly challenged dogma, many silenced by exile, torture, or execution, flooded his mind. Their courage inspired but also terrified him. If their ideas had once threatened to ignite heresy, what might happen if they resurfaced now? He thought about the modern world, an age of rapid technological advancement, widespread scientific discoveries, and a culture that increasingly valued reason over blind faith. The Church's struggle to adapt or resist these changes was palpable. Leo's mind was a turbulent sea of conflicting emotions. For days, perhaps weeks, he had wrestled with a decision that could shape the destiny of the Church and himself. The weight of centuries pressed down on him as he sat in the shadows of his chamber, contemplating the path ahead. To speak openly about his doubts or secretly forge a new course. These were choices with profound consequences. Each option carried peril and promise in equal measure, and Leo knew his ultimate decision would define his legacy. The whispers of conspiracy and the cryptic messages he had received haunted his every thought. Rumours swirled outside the Vatican walls. Factions within the Church either clinging desperately to tradition or pushing boldly toward reform. The very air itself seemed charged with tension, an invisible force ready to explode into chaos or renewal, depending on what he did next. He was painfully aware that his stance on modernity and the truths he uncovered might make him a hero or a heretic in the eyes of the powerful. For some, he would be a visionary seeking to reunite faith and reason. For others, an apostate, a threat to the divine order they believed was divine law incarnate. The very idea of risking his eternal soul by embracing change made his stomach churn, yet the compelling pull of truth and authenticity tugged insistently at his conscience. His thoughts turned again to the conservative faction, the guards of tradition. They believed the Church must remain inflexible, unwavering in dogma, unwavering in authority. They saw doubt as a dangerous contagion, a poison best eradicated by suppression and strict discipline. For them, any hint of change was heresy, a betrayal of divine will. But Leo also knew that behind closed doors, some within the Church were already questioning. They exchanged secret whispers. They debated in shadows, wary of the Church's rigid hierarchy. Perhaps he was not alone in his doubts. Perhaps there was a silent movement, a clandestine revolution stirring beneath the surface of the apparent stability. His gaze shifted to a small, sacred relic on his desk, a crucifix, worn with age. Its presence seemed to mock him with its unchanging serenity, while his inner turmoil threatened to fracture that calm. Could faith survive such contention? Could he, a servant of the divine, dare to challenge centuries of doctrine in pursuit of truth? His mind was made increasingly restless by those forbidden texts and ideas he had uncovered, evidence that some within the church had sought reform or questioned divine authority for generations. Would he be betraying his sacred oath if he boldly declared his doubts? Or would silence condemn him to eternal spiritual imprisonment? Was it his duty to protect the faith, or to seek a deeper, more honest understanding? A sudden knock sliced through the stillness, a tentative, hesitant sound. Leo's heart rate quickened. His instinct was to hide, to suppress any signs of internal conflict. But he knew that remaining silent was no longer an option. Carefully, he composed himself, and in a voice more composed than he felt, he responded, "Enter." The door opened slowly to reveal a trusted confidant, one of the few who knew of Leo's secret searches, someone who shared his discomfort with the status quo, a man whose loyalty was as cautious as his own. As he stepped inside, Leo saw the concern etched across his face, a silent plea for counsel. Without waiting, Leo beckoned him closer, eyes burning with suppressed emotion. "I have made my decision," Leo whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of resolve and trepidation. "I cannot remain silent, nor can I simply pretend that I do not wrestle with these doubts. It's time I reveal my truth." His confidant nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of the moment. "Then what will you do? How will you face the inevitable?" Leo hesitated. "I will speak carefully, but I must begin to reveal what I've uncovered, what I believe is the true nature of faith. Mutable, interpretive, alive. If I hide behind silence, I betray everything I have come to understand about honesty and integrity. But I fear the repercussions, and I fear the betrayal of my own soul if I continue to deny what I see before me." His confidant looked at him with unquestioning loyalty. "Whatever path you choose, know that many within the church are already watching, listening. Some seek to silence dissent, others to manipulate it. We must tread carefully." Leo took a long breath, eyes blazing with newfound conviction. "Then let us prepare. I will craft my message, one that invites truth and honest debate, but warns of danger. I will not shy away from risking everything for the sake of conscience. The time has come to challenge the old order, whether by reform or by awakening the conscience of the faithful myself." Leo folded the final pages of his letter with deliberate care, the ink still fresh, carrying the weight of his internal truth. He sat back in his ornate chair, gazing out the window of his private chamber, where the night sky stretched vast and indeterminate, a mirror to his own uncharted inner world. The moon cast a cold, silver glow across the city, unaware of the tumult within the Vatican's sacred walls. Here, in this moment, he was transformed from a shepherd of faith to a contemplative man, confronting the abyss of doubt and conviction intertwined. For years, he had been a vessel of tradition, a guardian of doctrines handed down through centuries. But now, he held in his hands the revelation of truth, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. The cryptic whispers, the ancient texts, the forbidden knowledge, all had converged into a single, profound realization. Faith was not static. It was a living dialogue between the divine and the human, shaped by history, conscience, and reason. And perhaps in its most authentic form, it must be allowed to breathe, question, and evolve. As he contemplated his own role, Leo knew that his life's course was set in motion. The choice before him was both simple and impossible: to remain silent, preserving his place in the hierarchy, cloaked in the comfort of tradition, or to speak openly, risking exile, persecution, or worse. To challenge the church from within, not with heresy, but with a call for renewal rooted in genuine faith and honesty. His mind drifted to the countless figures who had come before him, reformers and martyrs, visionaries and prophets, whose sacrifices made or broke movements for spiritual awakening. He thought of the reformers like Luther, who dared to challenge papal authority, of mystics who sought divine encounters beyond the confines of dogma, of those unknown souls whose doubts had burned quietly in the shadows, waiting for a voice. He closed his eyes briefly, summoning the strength of their stories, their defiance, and their unwavering hope. The Church's history was, paradoxically, both rigid and resilient. A tapestry woven with threads of dissent and orthodoxy, progress and repression. He had learned that true faith was not about unquestioning obedience, but about questioning itself, seeking understanding in the face of uncertainty. He knew that revealing his thoughts openly would unsettle the hierarchy, ignite political intrigue, and perhaps even spark a schism that could tear the church apart. Yet the burden of silence was far heavier, a spiritual suffocation that threatened to crush his very soul. He was no longer willing to wear the mask of infallibility, pretending that doubts did not assail him daily. Whatever was to come, Leo resolved to stand firm in his convictions. His final act of rebellion would not be one of heresy, but of sincerity, a call for truth to be spoken with humility and courage. If the heir to centuries of tradition could invoke change, perhaps it would inspire others within the church to question not just ideological dogmas, but the deeper meaning of faith itself. He reached out and took the pen once more, knowing that this document would be a historical record, an act of quiet revolution, a testament to the authentic voice of a man caught between divine duty and human humility. As he began to write, his hand was steady, each word chosen with care and solemn intent. In his closing remarks, Leo acknowledged the uncertainty that lay ahead. He expressed hope that future generations, believers, bishops, and even skeptics might find a way to reconcile faith with reason, tradition with progress. He wrote about the importance of love, compassion, and humility, values that transcend doctrine and speak directly to the human heart. His words were a plea for unity, not in conformity, but in the shared pursuit of truth and spiritual growth. As he finished, he folded the letter neatly and placed it in an envelope, sealing it with a mixture of resolve and quiet trepidation. This was his final act of honesty, a silent beacon for those daring enough to seek a deeper, more genuine faith. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Rome, casting a pale glow over the ancient city. Leo looked once more at the private chamber that had borne witness to his inner revolution, its walls echoing with his unspoken fears and hopes. He knew that his decision was no longer solely his own. He had taken a step that could ripple through history, challenging the very fabric of what the church was and could become. The moment of truth had arrived. He would send his message, knowing it might be intercepted, misunderstood, or dismissed. Yet in doing so, he had reclaimed his conscience, embracing the uncertainty, the risks, and the possibility of renewal. Whatever the future held, Leo had chosen authenticity over silence, an act of faith.